Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've had a good lunch. Today I have with me Ondřej and Jaroslav, and they're going to talk about Axon Server. Probably a lot of you are using it as well. Maybe you've also damaged it as well, destroyed it. They're actually going to tell you exactly how they have done that, their journey there, and well, I hope also how to fix it afterwards. Over to you guys.
Okay, thank you. So hello and welcome to our presentation. Today we would like to share some experiences which we gained while running our own Axon Server cluster. So we will talk about some issues we faced, how we resolved them, and what we actually learned from them. And also we will understand finally what is the reason behind focusing so much on the telemetry, as you saw from Richard's first presentation. By the way, here on the picture you can see my colleague Ondřej. He's just colorized. But maybe before I start, I would like to ask you if you could please raise your hands if you manage your own Axon Server cluster. Okay, thank you. And if you could please raise your hand once again if you manage to somehow break the Axon Server cluster. Okay, almost everybody. Okay, so before we start, let us please just introduce ourselves. So my name is Jaroslav, and I work as a lead developer in company Assist.
Yeah, and I'm Ondřej, but no one in this room probably will pronounce it correctly, so just call me Ondra, it's okay. And I work as lead DevOps engineer at Assist, and I will tell us something about our company. We are basically a software engineering company from Czech Republic. We have our offices in Prague, and as you could see in Richard's presentation, we have 4 teams, and we are basically here for software engineering and DevOps and observability. You can see our technological stack. We have around 100 employees, and most of them are developers or DevOps engineers.
Okay, so let's start with our journey. So our journey started, of course, at Sprint 0, where we started to prepare the infrastructure of the dev environment. So we launched Axon Server. We launched EC2 in AWS. We downloaded the jar and simply started the jar in dev mode. So this was it. Axon instance was running. It was a standard edition by that time because the paperwork for the EE edition was not done yet by that time. There was no authentication on the Axon console, and we have restricted the access using AWS web application firewall, which restricted it in a way that only access from the internal network was allowed. Then we connected the services which were actually communicating with the Axon server, and everything was running smoothly. Commands and queries were executed, events were stored into the event store, and also into the projections. So what could possibly get wrong? We have observed first issue after several sprints, or after a few sprints, because we were developing eShop application, and I remember that by the time we were testing the feature Add to Basket, our application simply was stuck, and we hadn't a clue what is actually happening. When I say that it was stuck, I mean that commands and queries were still being processed. However, new events were not written into projection. And we spent days investigating that there is some bug in the application because the Axon server was untouched since the Sprint 0. We have added a lot of tickets into backlog that we will focus on, for example, the authentication. But we really were focused on the development, and there was no log which would point us to the correct direction, whether the issue is in the application or in the Axon server. So after days of investigation, we found out that our customer actually has some penetration tests, which simply tries to open every page on the environment and tries to click on every button. And if you remember, there is no authentication, and it was running in dev mode. And if you start the Axon server in dev mode, you have this nice button called Clear Event Store. It simply drops everything. And our projection was remembering some position in the event store, and it was asking the Axon server, hey, give me events after this position. And Axon server simply responded, I have none. So this was the first issue that we encountered. Unfortunately, there was no observation by the time, so it was not easy to find out the issue. With the graphs which Richard showed, it would be a matter of minutes, maybe hours, but this really took us several days. So the solution was to simply drop the projection and let the Axon framework build it from the scratch. So this was the first issue, which forced us to actually work more on the cluster. And now my colleague will tell you more.
Yes. So after a few sprints, we have had our cluster ready, we have had our license, we have 3 nodes on each environment, and we can start doing some more nice things that would upgrade the application itself. We have been using older version of Axon Server because there was no one who could upgrade it. And we wanted to upgrade it to the 2023.0 because there's the new features, etc. And we had production already running, so we couldn't take a whole cluster offline because that would be disruption. So our idea was just pretty simple. Take one node out, replace the jar, connect it back, rinse, repeat. So this is diagram with pre-upgrade state. You take one node off, applications rebalance, you upgrade, and you just rinse, repeat. It's pretty easy, right? Ta-da, magic is done, no big deal. No. We have encountered this no leader for context error, and we have encountered it really, really many times. So we have few obstacles that were in the way. The main challenge was that administration of Axon cluster went to a new guy, myself, from old DevOps guy who was not that good Linux administrator, and I had to learn everything about Axon Server because I was completely unaware of the technology before I joined Assist. Then the other issue was that we wanted to have this automated by CI/CD pipelines, and everything was so smooth and so great, but it didn't work. So automation was not done correctly. As Jaroslav has said, we are using EC2 instances, and our idea at the time was just create new AMI, replace root volume, and have new instance. But old instance with new EBS volume. The issue with this was that there was no simple restore because you lost the volume at replacement, so you didn't have any recovery possible. The other issue was that after the upgrade, nodes went to fatal state, which is not good as the state says. And we knew that the issue was specific to our implementation because we have been on Slack with AxonIQ, we wanted support, they provided support, and they told us that they do not see this issue, that it needs to be something on our infrastructure because it's not on their side. So we knew that it's not bug in Axon Server, it's bug in our infra. So, because we are a user and we are a Linux admin and enthusiast, we have our suspicions. We knew there are always some suspects that always are the issue. We were ready to be heroes just coming to meetings saying, of course it's DNS because it's always DNS. Or just upgrade Java or Linux version. So we went one at a time. We have upgraded the Linux distribution, gRPC version, Java. We have fixed DNS because DNS actually was configured incorrectly, and we have overwritten it by using the hosts file at the time. The systemd service for Axon Server was not done correctly. There was some really obscure startup script that was not working properly. We have also suspicion that it could be Linux because Linux can break stuff. So we went one at a time, we fixed them all, and we're ready. Right now we can upgrade, everything will be good. No, it won't. Everything was still in fatal state. We have been using 2 applications at the time. We are now having 3, and those applications lost their tokens, so they couldn't connect to the Axon Server itself, but once we took the 2023 node off, it was everything smooth and working again. They started reconnecting and everything worked. as was previously used to. So we have now bigger investigation. We have tickets in Jira, of course. You have tickets in Jira, and we have started investigation. We have found inconsistency in domain and internal domain parameters in Axon Server YAML, which were actually used incorrectly, so we have fixed it with recovery mode, and we have found that, because it's always DNS, we have been using wrong names in TLS certificates, so we have to basically refresh the certificates. So now it really needs to be working, right? No. We have been starting again. At this point, it was several weeks of work that still led nowhere, so we have started questioning basically everything. We put our tinfoil hats on and we started questioning everything. Are we really using ARM instead of x86? Why? Are we really using Rocky Linux instead of Ubuntu? Why? Maybe just move to Ubuntu. Maybe it's something with Java compilation, because Java 4.6 was compiled with Java 8 and 2023 was compiled with Java 11. Could it be different? Well, we know it wasn't, but we have started. And because we were really unsure about everything, we have started creating new nodes and new nodes and new nodes. We basically have 2 nodes that were on 4.6 at all times during this process, and the third node was dynamic. It could be x86 Ubuntu, it could be ARM Rocky Linux, and everything in between you can imagine. So just a little bit of introduction to installation. What needs to be done in installation? Because the node was done manually, we have scraped automation completely off. So we have installed needed Linux packages, because we are all Linux admins and everyone has his favorite text editor. I like Vim, Richard likes MC, and Emacs. Yeah. So we have to install them all. We have to install correct Java. We have to upload the configuration file from Healthy Node. We have to download the jars with correct versions we wanted. And we also always started with old version just to see that everything works fine, then move to new version, and everything was not working fine again. So, and we have to also configure login, backups, monitoring, and generate SSL. Yeah, this is basically us in January, because this process was already blocking 2 dev teams, because we have been doing this on our dev environment, and they need the dev environment to work. So we are blocking 40-odd people by not being able to upgrade it correctly. So with Richard, we said to ourselves, let's not block them, let's do this on weekends, on the nights when they don't work. So we have been like this for a few weeks, and after a few weeks of having your morning shift and then your night shift, you really start becoming tired, like really tired. So we did some basic human errors. We have actually managed to split brain a whole cluster, because we have auto cluster first option, which tells you to which node you should connect, right? Well, what happens if you point it to your node? It starts the cluster. What happens if node 2 and 3 really believes that node 1 is part of cluster, and node 1 believes that only node 1 is part of cluster? You have split brain. So we have to start again from scratch on the environment, completely on new with template. We have also been logging to syslog, because we wanted debug logs and we wanted them fast. So there was no Kibana or something to send them. It was just systemctl and get logs. And we have debug log, because why not? You need the debug logs. So we have actually filled the whole EBS, and the instance crashed over a weekend. Even though there was no traffic, the logs were still logged into EBS, and warlog became so full that it crashed the instance. We have actually managed once to be really happy that finally we have managed the upgrade. It's working. I don't know why, but it's working. Only to see that I have created a wrong symlink, and I called version 2023 4.6, oh, sorry, the other way around. And I have started the old version so that everything was working, and I was so happy. I was on call with Richard saying, yeah, we did it. And then I connected to console, I see the 4.6 for 13. I was like, okay, there might be some issue. We are not done yet. We have also added empty Java agent because we have wrong curl. But that's just one of the errors. And we have we have forgot to install monitoring agent because our client is using Dynatrace. But hold up, something started working now. So we have suspects now. And we have learned during the way, it was several weeks at time, that no matter the Linux distribution, CPU architecture, Java version, TLS setup, everything you can imagine, it still doesn't work. So we have now Node that's upgraded and working, but we don't know why. So we have to go through history of all commands that we did on the node and see what we did and what we didn't, what we did on other nodes and what we didn't do on this one. And actually, we have found out that we forgot to install Dynatrace, and since the Dynatrace was not installed, everything was working. So we had our really crazy suspicion now. We have several layers of tinfoil heads because it's not possible. Dynatrace is so big, it cannot just break a Java application, right? Well, it did. Actually, what it did is that using etc ld iso preload file and ld preload environment variable, it modifies Java calls at runtime. And basically what it did is that JVM treated method as an attribute and it breaks stuff completely. And we wouldn't ever think of that because that is just so crazy at runtime of JVM to do this. So we have come to AxonIQ Slack and we asked, maybe it might be Dynatrace? And Alert came and said, yeah, you're not the first one. Just welcome. And there's this one's from me, and for last week I'm thinking about how to translate it without using the F word on stage. So just imagine what I could say about Dynatrace at the time, yeah. So basically we're done, yeah, because we just don't need the Dynatrace, everything is working, we could basically replicate the issue, we are really aware of basically everything. We got the mechanical sympathy that Richard was talking about because we knew the system from inside out. And the only issue that there is that right now we don't have any observability on most critical part of infrastructure that several applications are using, right? So maybe we should start with Prometheus and Grafana. I was not that sure, but then Richard showed me that it really has dark mode, so I was completely ready to install everything. We have a few points that I want to tell you. The first one is don't automate what you don't know well. Do it just manually. It's fine. We still do some things manually because we are not that sure with them. And automating something you don't really understand is always a bad idea. The other is that you should triple check everything that you thought that you double checked. We were really not suspecting Dynatrace to do this. Of all things, we were like, yeah, always you have to install Dynatrace because you need to observable, etc. And there's every Axon Server administrator should be good Linux administrator, which I still believe because basically if you are having self-hosted Axon Server and you are not using Docker or Kubernetes deploy, we are using the EC2 to this day because it's really fast and it's maybe even cheaper than using volumes on AWS. You have to know the Linux, you really do. You don't have to be like Linus level, but you really should be at least good admin before starting with this. And the last one is fake it till you make it, because we have been doing this for 8 months. The whole process took 8 months. But actually, our customer didn't notice anything. They were happy whole time. Production was running. No one was dropping events. Everything was smooth. Then we came, we say, yeah, we will upgrade the Axon Server in production. Oh, okay, there's no risk. Why wouldn't you do that? And we were like, yeah, exactly. Why wouldn't we do that? And with this, basically, me and Richard started with observability saga that you already heard of. And we provided the Axon cluster that we still have to this day to developers, and they can start doing their work on destroying our stuff. And with this, I will just pass the word to Jaroslav again.
Thank you. So everything which was mentioned till now happened on a dev environment, luckily. But let's take a look at some production issues. So our first fail on the production happened some months ago because we had a US in the backlog, which we implemented and wanted to deploy. And part of the US was complete change of display of orders history. And we tried to tightly couple the projections with our front end, so no unnecessary data modifications are being done when you try to view the data. So you just simply select them from the database, send them to front end, and you just display them. So we have a lot of copies of the same data with different structure. So, well, and due to this user story, we needed to completely redo one of the database entity. There are several ways how to do it. You can just simply prepare some migration script which you run in the database, but we do it the cleaner way, or we rebuild the projection. Well, but the way how we rebuilt the projection was not really sufficient. At the beginning, we had few pilot users, and what we managed to do is simply we drop the projection, we remove tracking tokens, and we wait until the Axon framework builds it from the scratch as before. However, this is not so fast if you have around 3 million of events. On the production, it took around 9 hours, so the client was not happy, so we need to find a better solution. But maybe before we take a look how we solve this issue, let's take a look at the architecture from the really high point of view. So in the middle, there is the Axon Server, of course. On the left, we have a microservice, which is actually handling the projection. So it writes the data from the new events into the projection, and it, of course, reads the data. Well, on the right, you simply have every other service which may or may not communicate with this projection service. So what we did, we have deployed version 2 of this service, which was running in parallel with the version 1. The difference is that the version 2 did not expose any query handlers. So when there was a query sent, we made it sure that it is always pointed out to the version 1 container or to the old one. And in the meantime, the version 2 was preparing the projections, and using this approach, we simply don't care whether it takes minutes, hours, days, or even weeks. We just simply wait once everything is prepared. And yeah, of course, I forgot to mention that there is no query handling, but of course, when you are using subscription queries, you have to make sure that no updates are sent from this service, because it's are really, really old updates. Well, and once the projection is prepared, you just turn off the old version and you may proceed with the deployment. So you redeploy the version 2 with the query handlers exposed. So you read the new projection. Plus, you may redeploy the rest of the application. And the question is, how can we know that the projection is already prepared? Have you ever heard of telemetry? So, for example, you can observe the event processor latency. Richard already covered this topic. So here you can see an example of my test on the dev environment where I have almost 4 million of events. So it took around 10 hours. That was the picture which Richard was showing before. Of course, you can tune this up. This is the default Axon framework settings, which means 1 thread, 1 segment, and 1 batch size. And you saw in Richard's presentation something like, I think there was 10 threads, 10 segments, and 100 batch size. So of course, you can speed it up like this as well, but this was just the first test. So you can observe the progress using this nice graph. But of course, the world is not always nice, sunny place, and there may be some exception. For example, you make a silly mistake when you process the event into the projection and null pointer is thrown. Or you have duplicated key exception when you compose incorrect unique database index and you try to insert actually duplicate value. Well, it happened on our side. So what you do when this happens is that you simply stop the new version of the projection, you remove everything that was built, you fix the issue in the code, and you start again. So this is how we actually solved our issue with the projection rebuilding. And when we managed to do it, we also extended this idea, which I will comment just right in a few minutes. But maybe let's take a look how to ensure that the projection is built silently. I think there are many ways how to implement this, so this is not the one bulletproof concept. I have created my own annotation query handling service, which is basically extension of the Spring Boot service with the conditional on property. So I take a look whether I should register the query handlers or not, and if so, the bean is created. If no, the bean is missing, so no query handler is registered in the service. Then the solution is actually pretty same with subscription queries. So we have wrapped up the class that is the Axon class that is responsible for sending the updates to the other clients which created the subscription query. And we have this query handler registered Boolean value, and we just check whether we should send it or whether we should drop it. So in this case, no update is sent to the client. Well, and lastly, you want to make sure that you only actually build the projection that you want to build and not anything else. So we register once again the event handlers only in the case when we want to register them, which means that if we are building new projection, we specify using environment variable what should be exposed. And in this conditional property, we just take a look whether the processing group is actually in the list, and if not, we don't register the bean once again. So, and we have extended this idea because on one of our applications, as you surely know, Axon framework is using XMLs to store the data in the event store by default. And we really wanted to migrate to JSON. However, this application was already deployed to production, so we just simply can't purge the event store, even though that we are experts in it. And of course, there is no outage allowed during the business hours. So we can communicate short outage, however, we cannot have some long outage. So what we did in this case is that we have connected new migration service, which just reads the data from the XML context and writes the data to a second JSON context. And we have once again waited so the migration process is finished. And the advantage of this approach is that, well, your production environment is not impacted at all. The only impact which we saw was the load on Axon Server, but it was so small, it was like 1 or 2 persons from the CPU, so it's not significant. Then we also prepared, just to be sure, no projection, which was built on the JSON events. You already know this approach, what we did. And of course, telemetry. You can observe the progress of the event store migration. So you have this nice red line, which is the JSON context. So you can see how it's growing by the time. And once it reaches the blue line, which is the production context or the old context, sorry, this was on dev environment, just to test. So once it reaches the line, you know that everything is migrated. Well, and then after everything is migrated, you just do a small outage of the command handling service. So you make sure that nothing is written anymore into the XML context. You just redeploy the application which is connected to the JSON context, and you have your JSONs. So this we also did on one of our applications. And maybe let's take a look into the code, because you might be wondering how hard this is implemented. So you need a Spring Boot service or Spring Boot application, of course. Just be aware that you need to make sure that all your event classes are on the class path, so that this application knows about every event. Then you just simply copy-paste the event store from Axon Server auto configuration or Axon Framework auto configuration, and just make sure that you read the data you work with the XMLs. And you need to make sure that the primary is used because you won't be able to start the application if you have multiple event stores. Then I have created second event store. As you can see, I have just copy-pasted Axon Server configuration. It's completely the same like it's in the auto configuration from the Axon framework. I just rewritten the context, so we have connected to the JSON context. Otherwise, everything is the same. Well, and then I have created the migration handler, which just simply writes the data into the new event store in the handle method. And you also need to make sure that you can process everything. And lastly, you create tracking event processor, where you assign this handler to this processor, as you can see on line 101. And that's basically everything. This is the way how we migrated the data from XML context to JSON context. So it was actually an application which was easy to implement, it's easy to observe, and it was quite fast, the migration. I think it took like 12 hours, so it can be finished within a day. Well, so that was everything from our side. I would like to thank you for your attention. Luckily, our production application or our applications connected to the cluster are running without any issues. Our client is happy. No animals were harmed. So I think everything is good. So do you have any questions?
Right, so thanks, guys. Anyone? Any questions? Feel free. If not, I have one. I'll get started.
Yeah.
So let's say, because you've given a lot of, I think, valuable advice, but if there would be one thing that you would say, okay, this Friday after the conference, right? People, if they're already using Axon Server, they're going to use it soon. What would be the one thing that you would say, learn this or implement that or change this out of all your...
Learn Linux.
I would learn Linux and remove Dynatrace from all my instances. I don't trust it anymore.
All right, very good, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, I see in the back there.
Thanks. Ooh, hello. Thanks for the talk. Quick question. Of all those issues you encountered, all those little problems, did you consider automating them to make them happen again?
No. Actually, to be a little bit more specific, we intentionally didn't want to automate anything at first stage because we were quite sure that we wouldn't cover all the cases. Because we found out that even though we have been using the system for a year or something like that, we don't know it properly. And without that, I don't think it's a good idea to automate anything. I think that you first really need to know your system before automating anything. And to this day, I don't have any major automation done because I still do most of the things on the cluster manually. Because there are still cases that we didn't cover. Even in this presentation, in the process, everywhere. We have some kind of automation, but it's semi-manual, let's say. And we know for sure that we always will have few nodes on production, few nodes on development cluster, nothing else for now. So there is not much pressure to automate everything. Yeah, because we are pressurizing the rest of our DevOps team, my DevOps team, to learn the Axon cluster and then we might automate it. But the pressure now is to just learn it, guys. Learn Linux really well, learn the system really well, then we can start talking about automation.
Also, maybe I will add, try to really focus on observing your application because suddenly you will realize that actually you understand your application, you understand what is happening. Before it was like, okay, it works, but what happens in the system, we don't really know.
I had one more extension to that. I was thinking about automating or recreating the problems to turn them into practices. So you talked about your team learning about Linux, learning it. So I'm not automating the solutions. I'm automating the conditions you're then learning from. I just wondered if you considered that.
No, actually no. Because we have like 4 DevOps guys and I am one of them, so.
You don't like self-harm?
Yeah, I like myself actually.
So thanks for the talk. I think that you answered already what I wanted to ask, but I would like to know about this graph of catching up on the projections. So the difference between the current state of the event store and the number of processed events. So and when you are making the switch, are you I think it was the next one.
Yeah.
So at the point where they are getting close, I think that they might not ever get to the precisely the same state. But if they are close enough, then are you making the switch manually, or are you having some sort of trigger? How are you handling that?
Definitely manually. You have to observe what is actually the difference. What we did is that there was old service, which were all old service connected to the old context, which was writing the changes when it was handling commands and triggering events. So we stopped this service. We waited until the migration service finished the migration, which was in several seconds. And then you just simply start the new service, which is connected to new context.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions?
Thank you for allowing me to relive the worst part of my life.
I am getting flashbacks as well.
So a question to the replay where you switch after you've seen your gun up. One of the challenges that we've faced with it that we really wanted to solve is being able to verify it before we switched over. Meaning, did you guys try anything in towards allowing interaction in towards the second node before you switch over? As to validate that nothing failed, but does it actually work?
Well, of course, there was a smoke test after the switch, so we opened the application and we did some tests, but when we tried the basic user flow, which means add something to basket, create an order, and etc. Plus, we do a lot of testing before these changes on our pre-prod environment, which is actually pretty close to the production. We don't have so many events there, but it's close.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions? If not, Ondřej, Jaroslav, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.